20th, 2025, and we're diving into something significant. It's this real jump in international criticism of Israel's operations there.
Right.
We'll be looking at some strong statements from key countries and also how Israel's responding.
Exactly. We've got this news report that really lays out the diplomatic back and forth. It gives you a window into the rising tensions and, frankly, the very different ways people are seeing this.
So the plan is?
Well, our aim today is to kind of get past the headlines, really try to grasp the core issues, what solutions are maybe on the table, and, the roadblocks, the big obstacles.
Okay, let's start with that wave of condemnation then.
Yeah.
The report mentions a joint statement, UK, France, Canada. What was the main thrust of their message? What got people talking?
Well, what's striking is that these three big players are speaking with one voice here. Their statement basically demands an immediate stop to the military stuff in Gaza.
An immediate stop.
Yeah, and crucially, getting humanitarian aid fully flowing again. They're not mincing words about how they see things.
No, they aren't. The report points out they slammed Israel's very limited aid resumption, just 5 trucks. Since the blockade started March 1st, they called that wholly inadequate. That's strong language.
It really is. And, it goes deeper than just the numbers. They actually warned that blocking aid like this, it could be a breach of international humanitarian law.
Wow. Okay, so that raises serious legal questions then.
It absolutely does, about how the conflict is being conducted.
And they didn't just stop at words, right? They hinted at further concrete actions, maybe sanctions.
Yeah, that's the implication. It suggests they might be prepared to do more than just issue statements if things don't change.
So, potential shift in diplomacy. And they stressed working with the UN on aid delivery.
Right. That seems key. It's not just disapproval, it's hinting at real consequences. And bringing in the UN, well, that points to wanting impartial, effective aid getting through.
Okay, let's pivot to Israel's side. The report says Prime Minister Netanyahu's response was pretty defiant. How did he take this criticism?
Well, defiant is one word for it. His rebuttal used really strong language, accusing these Western countries of, and I'm quoting here, rewarding the genocidal assault of October 7.
Wow.
Yeah. And even suggesting they're encouraging more attacks on Israel. So basically a flat-out rejection of their concerns.
Quite an accusation, accusing allies of rewarding genocide.
It is. And you have to wonder, there are probably domestic political reasons for such a strong statement, but internationally, it's a stark message.
It paints Israel as feeling quite isolated, maybe? And he doubled down on continuing the war, didn't he? Until the hostages are out and Hamas is gone.
Exactly. No sign of budging on those military goals. He's basically linking the criticism directly to what he sees as, an existential threat to Israel's security.
That framing probably connects with some Israelis, but yeah, could definitely push allies further away. And all this is happening while Israel's launched this new operation, Gideon's Chariots. What are its stated goals, according to the report?
So Gideon's Chariots, the report says, aims to fully seize Gaza, take apart what they call Hamas infrastructure.
Which usually means tunnels, weapons, governing structures, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Military capability, administration, all of it, and also moving civilians from the north to the south. So big implications for people on the ground.
And even that tiny amount of aid we mentioned, the 5 trucks, apparently face pushback. Not just internationally, but maybe even inside Netanyahu's own government.
Yeah, the report suggests that. It really throws into sharp relief just how conflicted the views are on how to handle this, doesn't it?
It really does. Balancing security arguments with this massive international pressure about the humanitarian side.
That's the tightrope. And those internal debates just show how complex it is.
And that humanitarian crisis, the report says it's severe. 5 trucks since March 1st, for 2.2 million people. And the IDF itself, their own assessments, are apparently warning about near starvation.
That's what the report indicates, yes. It's alarming.
Hard to even picture the scale of need when so little is getting through. What are the absolute basics people need right now?
Well, the gap between need and delivery is just immense. The IDF warnings themselves kind of back up the international criticism about access, don't they?
Yeah.
The immediate needs are, the absolute basics. Food, clean water, medicine, medical staff, shelter for all the people forced to move. Without consistent aid, the situation just gets worse and worse.
And it wasn't just the UK, France, and Canada pushing back. There was another statement from 22 donor nations.
That's right. A much broader group. Germany, Japan, Australia, a lot of EU countries are mentioned. That really dials up the international concern.
A big coalition. And their message was just as blunt.
Pretty much. They demanded the immediate and full reopening of humanitarian corridors. No messing around.
And they specifically said small steps aren't good enough.
Exactly. They're saying the urgency is too high, the crisis too deep for, like, piecemeal solutions. Half measures won't cut it anymore.
Now, going back to the UK, France, and Canada statement, they had other criticisms too, beyond just the aid situation, right? Touching on some longer-term issues.
They did, yeah. What stood out was their rejection of any permanent forced displacement of Gazans. That addresses those fears about, long-term demographic changes.
Right, trying to push people out permanently.
Exactly. And they also condemned inflammatory rhetoric from some Israeli government figures, probably meaning statements that just escalate things and hurt peace prospects.
And they drew that line? Okay, Israel has a right to self-defense, but this current escalation, wholly disproportionate, that's a heavy term, legally and ethically.
It is. They're basically saying, we see your security concerns, but the impact on civilians in Gaza seems way out of line with the military goals.
When they talk about proportionality in international law, what kind of things are they looking at? How is that judged?
Well, it's complex, but essentially, the harm caused to civilians and civilian property shouldn't be excessive compared to the direct military advantage you expect to gain. So you have to look at the targets, the weapons used, and the actual civilian casualties and damage that result.
Got it. They also brought up the West Bank settlements, didn't they? Warning about targeted sanctions if building continues.
Yes, that's another big one. They see settlement expansion as directly undermining any chance of a future Palestinian state.
For listeners maybe less familiar, what are these settlements, briefly, and why are they so contentious internationally?
Sure. They're Israeli communities built on land Israel captured in the 1967 war land that Palestinians see as part of their future country. Most of the world considers them illegal under international law, specifically the Fourth Geneva Convention.
Which prohibits moving your own population into occupied territory.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a massive stumbling block for any peace process.
Okay, so with all this condemnation, these warnings, what paths forward are actually being talked about in the report? And what's stopping them?
Well, the report points to a couple of things. These international players, they're still pushing for a two-state solution. They seem to think it's the only viable long-term answer.
Still the main framework for many.
Yeah. And there's this upcoming conference in New York, June 18th, France and Saudi Arabia co-hosting. That signals a kind of renewed diplomatic effort.
Okay. And there's also mention of an Arab-led plan for governing Gaza. What does that involve?
Right. This seems to be an emerging idea. It involves phases. First, an independent committee of technocrats, neutral experts would govern Gaza, focusing on immediate needs like rebuilding, aid.
Sort of a caretaker government.
Kind of. Then, the idea is to eventually hand over control to the Palestinian Authority. And importantly, it includes a UN peacekeeping force for stability, plus Egypt and Jordan helping train Palestinian security forces.
It sounds, well, structured on paper anyway. But the report says Netanyahu is strongly against it.
Very strongly. His government sees this plan basically as a backdoor to a Palestinian state, which they fundamentally oppose.
Because it involves the Palestinian Authority eventually taking over.
Precisely. They call it unworkable and against Israel's security interests.
And instead, Netanyahu's office apparently prefers President Trump's alternative plan, which the report says involves permanently relocating Gazans.
That's what the report suggests, yes. A completely different vision.
I mean, relocating an entire population.
Yeah.
What would the consequences of that even be, legally, regionally?
Oh, massive. It would almost certainly be condemned globally as violating international law against forced displacement. And regionally, it would likely pour fuel on the fire, cause huge unrest, destabilize things even further. It's a radical idea, far outside the accepted frameworks.
So Netanyahu's position seems really locked in. He's quoted saying the war ends tomorrow if Hamas disarms, releases hostages, and Gaza is demilitarized. Very clear conditions.
Extremely clear. And seemingly non-negotiable from his perspective. It shows his commitment to what he defines as Israel's security needs.
And framing it as a war of civilization versus barbarism.
Yeah, that language really reinforces his determination to achieve what he calls total victory on his terms.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've got this growing international outcry, really focused on the humanitarian disaster in Gaza, demanding immediate help.
Right. A huge amount of pressure.
But on the other side, you have the Israeli government, led by Netanyahu, sticking to its military aims against Hamas, almost regardless of that global pressure.
That's the core tension, isn't it? The urgent need to stop the suffering versus Israel pursuing its security goals as defined by its leaders. The views on aid, on Gaza's future, on how to get to any kind of resolution, they're just worlds apart.
It's incredibly complex.
Deeply complex, and deeply entrenched positions on all sides.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About the long-term fallout of what's happening right now. And with these completely opposing views, what could total victory actually mean for everyone involved, especially the civilians caught in the middle? That's something we definitely need to keep watching.